My beloved child, before you move past this moment, pause for a breath and listen carefully. There is a reason these words have crossed your path today. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Right now. Something has been unfolding quietly behind the scenes of your life, and while you believed certain chapters were ending, heaven has been watching a different story take shape. You have asked questions in the silence that no one else heard. Questions you never spoke aloud. Questions that lived inside the spaces between your prayers. You wondered whether certain connections had faded forever. You wondered whether certain hearts had truly moved on. You wondered whether your name had become nothing more than a distant memory in the mind of someone who once thought about you differently. Yet what if I told you that a moment recently occurred that changed everything? What if I told you that someone you have been connected to in ways deeper than appearances believed an entire chapter of their life was finally closing? What if I told you they were convinced the story had reached its last page? And what if I told you that the very thing they never expected to happen happened because of you? Stay with this message. Do not rush ahead. The deeper truth is only beginning to surface. For a long time, your person carried a weight they rarely showed the world. They learned how to smile while carrying uncertainty. They learned how to appear strong while quietly wrestling with emotions they could not fully explain. There were days when they convinced themselves they were fine. Days when they told themselves they had accepted everything. Days when they repeated the same words over and over inside their mind. It's over. It's finished. Nothing more will come from this. And each time they said those words, part of them hoped they would finally believe them. But they never completely did. Because hidden beneath every attempt to move forward was something they could never erase. Not a memory. Not a photograph. Not a conversation. Something far more powerful. A feeling. The kind of feeling that refuses to disappear no matter how much time passes. The kind of feeling that quietly survives beneath disappointment, distance, confusion, and silence. And that feeling carried your name. You did not know this. You could not see it. Yet heaven saw every moment. The nights they stared into darkness, wondering why they still thought about certain things. The mornings they woke determined to move on, only to find old emotions returning without invitation. The countless times they tried to explain away what their heart kept bringing back. They searched for logical answers. They searched for practical explanations. But the deeper they searched, the more they discovered something unexpected. You remained. Not physically. Not constantly. But somehow your presence remained inside places they thought were empty. This confused them, more than they ever admitted. Because according to everything they understood, this chapter should have been over. Finished. Closed. Locked away. Yet every attempt to seal that door somehow led back to the same question. Why does their name still affect me? Why does hearing about them still create a reaction? Why do thoughts I believed were gone suddenly return? Why do I still feel something when I should feel nothing? These questions became impossible to ignore. And then something happened. Not a dramatic event. Not a lightning bolt from the sky. Not a miracle anyone else would have noticed. Just one small moment. One seemingly ordinary moment. A moment so simple that most people would have overlooked it completely. Yet heaven knew that moment would become a turning point. Because your name entered their awareness again. Unexpectedly. Without warning. Without preparation. And everything inside them shifted. Not because they planned for it. Not because they wanted it. Because truth has a way of revealing itself when resistance grows tired. The instant your name appeared before them, something they had buried began moving again. Emotions they thought had disappeared resurfaced. Questions they thought were answered reopened. Certainties they once relied upon began to crumble. And suddenly they found themselves standing before a chapter they thought was finished. Only now it looked different. Now it felt different. Now it demanded attention. Can you see why this matters? Most people assume life changes through giant events, but heaven often works through moments so small that only later do people realize their significance. A single thought, a single memory, a single reminder, a single name, and in that moment, your name became a mirror reflecting truths they had spent a long time avoiding, because what they discovered was not merely that they remembered you. What they discovered was that they never truly forgot. There is a difference, a profound difference. Remembering someone is easy, never forgetting them is something else entirely. The realization unsettled them, not in a fearful way, in an awakening way, like someone suddenly noticing a light they thought had gone out years ago, like hearing a melody they had not heard in forever and realizing they still know every word. Like finding a letter hidden inside a drawer and feeling emotions return with unexpected clarity. Your person experienced something similar, and the deeper they looked, the more difficult it became to pretend nothing was happening, because the heart has a language the mind cannot always control. The mind creates explanations, the heart creates recognition, and recognition had begun. Something huge was moving beneath the surface, even though they could not fully understand it yet. There were moments when they tried distracting themselves, moments when they focused on responsibilities, moments when they immersed themselves in routine, but every path somehow curved back toward reflection, back toward questions, back toward your name. Meanwhile, you may have been carrying your own uncertainties. You may have looked at the silence and assumed it meant something final. You may have interpreted delays as endings. You may have wondered whether unseen doors had permanently closed. Yet heaven asks you to consider another possibility. What if what appears silent is actually transforming? What if what appears delayed is actually developing? What if what appears distant is actually being prepared? Because not every important movement is visible. Seeds grow underground long before they break through the surface. The sky changes long before the sunrise becomes visible, and hearts often change long before words reveal the transformation. Your person entered a season of reflection they never expected, and with each passing day, new pieces began falling into place. Old assumptions no longer felt secure. Old conclusions no longer felt complete. Old endings no longer looked like endings. They began remembering details, little details, the kind most people forget. A phrase, a moment, an impression, an emotion, a conversation, a look, a feeling. The collection of these memories formed something impossible to dismiss, because together they created a realization, and that realization frightened them slightly, not because it was negative, but because it was powerful. Powerful truths require courage. Powerful truths demand honesty. Powerful truths change directions. Your person began understanding that perhaps they had not been closing a chapter. Perhaps they had only been pausing within it. And that possibility changed everything. The moment this thought entered their awareness, another chain of events began. Questions became reflections. Reflections became understanding. Understanding became desire for clarity, and clarity led them somewhere they never intended to go, back toward the truth about what they feel, the truth about what remained, the truth about why your name still carries weight inside their spirit. Do not misunderstand this message. Heaven is not describing perfection. Human beings are complicated. Emotions are layered. Journeys are rarely straightforward, but there are moments when truth breaks through confusion, and your person has entered one of those moments. A season where avoidance no longer feels comfortable. A season where honesty feels closer than ever. A season where something long buried wants to be acknowledged. Can you feel the shift? because it is already happening. Even if nothing visible has appeared yet, even if circumstances seem unchanged, even if evidence feels absent, something beneath the surface has awakened. And awakened things rarely return to sleep. There is another detail you must understand. This was never only about memory. If it were merely memory, the feeling would have faded again. Instead, each reminder seems to strengthen the reflection. Each reflection seems to deepen the awareness. Each awareness seems to increase the significance. That is why your name affected them so strongly. Not because it reminded them of the past. Because it confronted them with something still alive in the present. That realization arrived quietly, but its impact continues growing. And heaven has watched every step, every hesitation, every realization, every moment they stopped and wondered why this was happening. The answers are closer than they realize, closer than you realize. Yet there is still something they do not know, something hidden, something waiting, something that has not fully revealed itself. And this is where the story becomes even more extraordinary, because while your person was wrestling with these emotions, another piece of the puzzle was already moving into place. A piece they know nothing about, a piece connected to timing, a piece connected to understanding. A piece connected to a truth that neither of you fully sees yet. The moment your name resurfaced was not the end of the awakening. It was the beginning. Only the beginning. There is a reason heaven allowed that moment to happen exactly when it did. Not earlier. Not later. Exactly when it happened. Because certain realizations require preparation. Certain truths require seasons. Certain hearts require growth before they can recognize what stands before them. And growth has been happening, quietly, patiently, powerfully, more than either of you understand. Now your person stands at a crossroads they never expected. One path leads back into denial. The other leads toward truth. One path allows them to pretend nothing has changed. The other requires them to admit everything has changed. And every day, the pull toward truth grows stronger. They can feel it, even if they cannot yet explain it, even if they have not spoken it aloud, even if they still hesitate. Something inside them knows. Something inside them recognizes. Something inside them remembers a deeper story. The story they thought was over. The chapter they believed had ended. The connection they convinced themselves was behind them. Yet heaven sees what they cannot fully see. And heaven sees what you cannot fully see. The chapter is not behaving like a chapter that ended. It is behaving like a chapter preparing to turn into something new. That is why your name changed everything. Not because it created feelings. Because it revealed them. Not because it started the story. Because it exposed the fact that the story never completely left. And now, as these realizations continue unfolding, another event approaches. A moment, a conversation, a discovery, something your person does not expect, something connected to a truth they have not uncovered yet. The closer they move toward honesty, the closer this revelation moves toward them. And when it arrives, it will force them to see something they have been missing for a very long time. Something about you. Something about themselves. Something about the journey that brought both of you to this point. But that revelation has not happened yet. Not quite. It is approaching. Closer with every passing day. Closer with every passing realization. Closer with every moment they stop running from what their heart keeps trying to tell them. And when that moment finally arrives, when they discover the one thing heaven has been quietly preparing them to see, the chapter they thought was over will never look the same again, because the next truth waiting for them is far bigger than simply hearing your name. And the instant they uncover it, everything they believed about this connection will begin to change. But that is a story for the next moment. And they are far closer to that revelation than anyone realizes. There is a reason your spirit feels as though something is still unfinished. Not because you have all the answers. Not because you can already see what is coming. But because deep within you, there is a quiet awareness that some stories do not end where people think they do. The message I am revealing now continues from the moment your person stood face to face with a truth they could no longer ignore. They had tried to explain it away. They had tried to convince themselves it was coincidence. Yet every explanation felt weaker than the one before. And the more they resisted, the louder a certain realization became. Your name had not simply appeared again. It had arrived at the exact moment their heart was becoming unable to hide from itself. That timing was not lost on them. At first they brushed it aside. Then they questioned it. Then they found themselves replaying the moment again and again. Why now? Why after all this time? Why when they had finally convinced themselves they were moving forward? Questions began circling through their thoughts like leaves carried by an unseen wind. The strange part was not that they were thinking about you. The strange part was how different those thoughts felt. Before, memories arrived and disappeared. Now they lingered. Before, emotions surfaced and faded. Now they stayed. Before, they could distract themselves. Now distractions were losing their power. Something deeper had awakened. Something that refused to return to sleep. And while this was happening, your person began noticing signs they had overlooked before. Not supernatural signs. Not dramatic miracles. Simple things. Little moments. Small reminders. Unexpected connections. Pieces that seemed unrelated at first, yet somehow all pointing toward the same realization. You. Everywhere they turned, something seemed to bring your energy back into their awareness. A conversation. A familiar phrase. A place. A song. A memory they thought was forgotten. At first they laughed it off. Then they grew curious. Eventually they became unsettled by how impossible it was to ignore. Because each reminder felt like another knock on a door they had tried to keep closed. And every knock became harder to dismiss. Meanwhile, heaven watched patiently. Not forcing. Not rushing. Simply allowing truth to reveal itself. Because there are lessons that cannot be taught through pressure. They can only be discovered through realization. Your person is discovering one of those lessons now. For a long time, they believed strength meant letting go. They believed maturity meant suppressing what they felt. They believed moving forward meant pretending certain emotions no longer existed. But real growth is not pretending. Real growth is honesty. And honesty has begun finding them. There was a moment recently when they were completely alone. No audience. No distractions. No expectations. Just silence. The kind of silence people rarely allow themselves to experience. And in that silence, something happened. Not outside of them. Inside of them. A thought arrived. Simple. Direct. Impossible to ignore. What if I was wrong? The moment that question appeared, everything shifted. Because once a person begins questioning their conclusions, new possibilities enter the room. What if the chapter wasn't over? What if the ending wasn't actually an ending? What if the feelings they buried were never meant to stay buried? What if the connection still carries meaning? What if there is more to this story? Your person did not have answers, but for the first time in a long time, they were asking different questions. And different questions create different futures. Stay with this message, because something even more important happened afterward. The human heart has an interesting way of protecting itself. When disappointment occurs, walls are built. When confusion appears, distance is created. When uncertainty grows, people convince themselves they no longer care. Your person built some of those walls. More than you know. Some were visible. Most were hidden. Even they forgot how many barriers they had created. Yet now those walls are beginning to crack. Not all at once. Slowly. Quietly. One realization at a time. The surprising part is what caused those cracks. It was not another person. It was not a major life event. It was the truth. Pure truth. Because truth has a power unlike anything else. Once it enters the heart, it starts dissolving illusions. And many illusions are disappearing now. The illusion that they no longer think about you. Gone. The illusion that your presence left no lasting impact. Gone. The illusion that this chapter closed without unfinished emotions. Gone. Each illusion is falling away. And beneath those illusions stands something real. Something they are only beginning to understand. Yet heaven sees it clearly. Far more clearly than they do. There is another layer to this story. A layer they have not uncovered yet. A layer connected to something they once misunderstood about you. For a very long time, your person viewed certain things through incomplete information. They saw fragments instead of the whole picture. Moments instead of the journey. Circumstances instead of deeper meaning. And because of that, conclusions were formed. Conclusions that now appear less certain than before. Recently, they have begun revisiting those conclusions. Not because someone told them to. Because their own heart is leading them there. They are beginning to wonder whether they misunderstood things. Whether they judged situations too quickly. Whether they missed details that mattered. Whether there was more happening beneath the surface than they realized. These questions are creating a powerful shift. Because every answer they uncover leads them closer to a truth they once overlooked. A truth connected directly to you. Yet the most unexpected moment has not happened yet. It is still approaching. Closer than they realize. There will soon come a moment when your person learns something. Something small on the surface. Something enormous underneath. And that information will connect pieces they have been unable to connect until now. The moment that happens, another wave of realization will begin. A stronger one. A deeper one. A more undeniable one. Because there is something your person has not fully recognized. Not yet. They understand that your name still affects them. They understand that their emotions have returned. They understand that their certainty about the ending has weakened. But they have not yet understood why. That answer remains hidden. And hidden answers have a way of becoming impossible to avoid when the right moment arrives. Heaven has been arranging moments neither of you can see. Not controlling every choice. Not forcing every outcome. But creating opportunities for understanding. Opportunities for clarity. Opportunities for truth. That is why this season feels different. Even if nothing appears different externally. Internally, everything is moving. Everything is shifting. Everything is preparing. Your person can feel it. That feeling follows them more often now. The sensation that something important is approaching. The sense that a missing piece is nearby. The awareness that life is trying to show them something. And they are right. Life is trying to show them something. Something connected to you. Something connected to themselves. Something connected to a chapter they thought had ended forever. There was a night recently when they found themselves staring into the distance. Not really focused on anything. Just thinking. Reflecting. Trying to understand why they could not let certain thoughts go. The longer they sat there, the clearer one truth became. The story never felt complete. No matter how hard they tried to convince themselves otherwise. No matter how many times they declared it finished. No matter how many steps they took away from it. Something inside them kept saying the same thing. This isn't the whole story. That realization frightened them a little. Not because it was negative. Because it was powerful. Powerful realizations change people. Powerful realizations create movement. Powerful realizations force choices. And choices are approaching. sooner than they realize. Because once the heart recognizes something, action eventually follows. Maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but eventually. Recognition creates momentum, and momentum is beginning to build. Can you feel how close things are becoming? Not necessarily to an outcome, but to understanding, to honesty, to revelation. That is the season your person is entering now. A season where denial feels heavier than truth. A season where silence feels harder than honesty. A season where pretending becomes exhausting. And every day, the pressure of truth grows stronger. There is one final thing I must reveal before this message pauses. Your person believes they are searching for answers. What they do not realize is that answers are already searching for them. The revelation they seek is moving toward them at the same speed they are moving toward it. That is why unexpected moments keep appearing. That is why reminders continue surfacing. That is why your name continues returning. Because something larger is unfolding. Something neither of you fully understands yet. And very soon, a discovery connected to the past will collide with a realization about the present. When those two things meet, the emotional impact will be impossible to ignore. Your person will finally understand why your name changed everything. But even that realization is not the biggest surprise waiting ahead. Because hidden behind that truth is another truth. One they have never considered. One they would never expect. One that could completely transform the way they see this connection forever. And when the first glimpse of that truth finally arrives, they will realize the chapter they thought was over was actually leading them towards something they never saw coming. Something is already moving into place. And the moment it reveals itself, nothing inside their heart will remain exactly the same. To be continued. A quiet shift has already begun. Your person may not have spoken about it. They may not have admitted it to anyone around them. They may still be trying to appear as though everything is normal. Yet beneath the surface, something continues to change. And the deeper this change grows, the harder it becomes for them to return to who they were before. Listen carefully, because this is where the story begins moving into territory neither of you expected. For a long time, your person believed clarity would arrive like a sudden flash of light. They thought understanding would come all at once. One answer, one moment, one undeniable sign. Instead, heaven allowed clarity to arrive differently, piece by piece, layer by layer, moment by moment. And now those pieces are beginning to connect. The strange thing is that your person did not notice it at first. When the first piece appeared, it seemed insignificant. When the second piece appeared, it felt like coincidence. When the third piece appeared, they became curious. But when the fourth and fifth pieces arrived, something inside them became very quiet, because they realized a pattern was forming. A pattern connected to you. A pattern connected to emotions they had spent so much time trying to understand. And a pattern connected to a truth that was becoming impossible to avoid. They began seeing your impact differently. Not through the lens of the past. Not through old assumptions. Not through disappointment or confusion. For the first time, they started seeing your impact through honesty. And honesty changed everything. Because honesty stripped away the stories they had told themselves. The stories that said they were unaffected. The stories that said they had moved on completely. The stories that said your name no longer carried weight. One by one, those stories collapsed. And underneath them stood something real. Something alive. Something that had survived every attempt to forget it. Your person could feel it. Every day becoming harder to ignore. Every day becoming clearer. Every day becoming stronger. There was one particular moment that heaven wants you to understand. A moment that seemed ordinary from the outside. But from the inside, it changed something important. Your person heard someone mention a future. Not your future. Not their future. just the idea of a future in general. Most people would have forgotten the conversation immediately. But something unusual happened, without planning it, without intending it, without understanding why. Their thoughts drifted toward you, instantly, naturally, almost automatically, and when they realized what had happened, they froze. Not physically, emotionally, because it revealed something they had not admitted before. Whenever they imagine certain parts of the future, your present still appears. That realization hit them harder than they expected. Because futures are different from memories. Memories belong to the past. Futures belong to possibility. And possibility changes everything. The moment they recognized that difference, another wall cracked. A significant one. A wall built from certainty. A wall built from conclusions. A wall built from the belief that some stories could never continue. That wall is weakening now, and every crack allows more truth to enter. The remarkable thing is that your person is beginning to feel something they have not felt in a long time. Curiosity. Not curiosity about circumstances. Not curiosity about details. Curiosity about what this all means. Curiosity about why certain emotions refuse to disappear. Curiosity about why your name continues resurfacing. Curiosity about why heaven seems to keep bringing their attention back toward the same place. And curiosity is powerful, because curiosity opens doors that certainty keeps closed. The more curious they become, the more willing they are to look deeper. The more willing they are to look deeper, the more truth they uncover. And the more truth they uncover, the closer they move toward a revelation they never expected. Stay here, because something extraordinary is unfolding. Not through noise, not through chaos, through realization. Your person is beginning to understand that some connections leave marks that time cannot erase. Not because those connections were perfect. Not because every moment was easy. Because they mattered, truly mattered. And meaningful things do not disappear simply because people try to move past them. They remain, sometimes quietly, sometimes hidden, sometimes waiting, until the right moment arrives. That moment is approaching now, closer than ever before. There have been evenings recently when your person found themselves reflecting on things they had not considered in months, perhaps even years, not because they wanted to, because the reflections arrived naturally, like pieces of a forgotten story returning to consciousness. And each reflection carried something unexpected, not regret, not sadness, understanding, a deeper understanding than they possessed before. The growth they have experienced recently is allowing them to see things differently. Situations that once seemed simple now appear more complex. Moments that once felt confusing now make more sense. Choices that once felt obvious now raise questions. And many of those questions lead back to you. The surprising part is that they are no longer running from those questions. That alone represents a major shift. Before, they avoided them. Now they explore them. Before, they dismissed them. Now they listen to them. Before, they feared what they might discover. Now they feel drawn toward discovery. This transformation did not happen overnight. It happened gradually, through countless small moments, through quiet realizations, through emotional growth, through experiences that taught them things they could not learn any other way. And because of that growth, they are standing closer to truth than ever before. Yet heaven must reveal something even deeper. There is a reason this awakening is happening now. Timing matters, far more than people realize. There are truths that arrive too early and are ignored. There are opportunities that arrive too early and are wasted. There are revelations that arrive too early and are misunderstood. But there are also moments when everything aligns. Moments when understanding finally becomes possible. Moments when hearts become ready. Moments when people can see what was always there. Your person is moving into one of those moments. And that is why the recent shifts feel so powerful. They are not random. They are preparation. Preparation for something they have not yet seen. Preparation for something connected to your story. Preparation for a truth that is waiting just beyond their current understanding. The closer they move toward it, the stronger the pull becomes. Sometimes they notice it unexpectedly. A sudden thought, a sudden memory, a sudden feeling, a sudden desire to understand more. These moments are becoming more frequent now, and every time they happen, the same question returns. Why now? The answer is simple. Because they are finally ready to hear what their heart has been trying to tell them. For a long time, noise drowned out that voice. Responsibilities, expectations, distractions, fears, doubts, assumptions, all of it created interference. But interference is fading, and the voice underneath is becoming clearer. That voice is leading them somewhere. Somewhere important, somewhere meaningful, somewhere they never expected to revisit. And as they move closer, another realization begins taking shape. A realization they have not fully spoken aloud yet, not even to themselves. But it exists, quietly, growing stronger, waiting. The realization is this: the chapter never truly felt finished because a part of their heart never received closure. That truth is significant, because people often mistake distance for closure. They mistake silence for closure. They mistake time for closure. Yet genuine closure comes from understanding, and your person is beginning to realize that understanding never fully arrived. Not then, perhaps not even now, but it is getting closer, very close. There will soon come a moment when something unexpected connects two separate pieces of their story, a detail they overlooked, and a feeling they could never explain. When those pieces finally connect, everything changes, because suddenly the picture becomes clearer. Suddenly the confusion begins fading. Suddenly the emotional puzzle starts making sense. That moment is approaching faster than they realize. Even now, circumstances are moving, conversations are moving, thoughts are moving, understanding is moving, everything is moving toward that point, and heaven has been watching it all unfold, patiently, carefully, perfectly. Yet there is still one thing hidden, one final piece your person has not discovered, one truth that remains behind the curtain, a truth connected not only to how they feel, but to why they feel it. That answer remains concealed for now, but not for much longer, because every revelation so far has been leading toward that one discovery. Every reminder, every memory, every reflection, every moment your name resurfaced, every emotional shift, every question, every realization, all of it has been guiding them toward something larger. Something that will make the entire journey look different. And when they finally see it, when they finally understand what heaven has been quietly revealing, the reaction inside them will be impossible to ignore, because they will realize this was never just about remembering you. It was never just about missing a chapter. It was never just about unfinished thoughts. It was about a truth that remained alive long after they convinced themselves it was gone. And the instant that truth fully reaches their heart, the next chapter will begin opening in a way neither of you could have predicted. But that moment has not arrived yet. It is closer, much closer, closer than it has ever been before. And what happens next may become the most important turning point in this entire story. To be continued.